also the school police force.
Behind 26. Okay, go ahead, Ralph.
Go ahead.
Yep.
Okay, I have account 350, which is contracted services. And basically, most of this account goes for maintenance contracts on our CCTV cameras. Also, I use that for some training for our security and also the school police. And my next account also is the 350 Eastern Area High School Security. And what I use that for is, mostly that is used for uniforms for our security personnel, making sure they have shirts, pants, and also that they have jackets and raincoat for when they do details outside. And also for purchasing of radios. The next account is 432, which is near Middle School, 56. And mostly this account, along with the account 432 for the middle school complex, most of this money in this budget is used for maintenance on the radios and the purchase of batteries for radios. Account number 522, which is auto insurance. This covers one security car that we have, one vehicle for our school attendance officer, and 4 school police cars. Account number 580, which is travel. That is used for any security person when they have to travel from one school to another, if they're involved in a search or any activity at a school. That pretty much now has been cut down since we do have our vehicles, that we try to use the school district vehicle rather than use our own cars. My next account is 610, which is supplies for the security / police. And that covers our supplies that we get from our office supply company. We purchase some signs, we buy CPR, gloves, and mouthpieces for the security people. Also, I use that for ammunition for the police officers when we qualify at the range. And account number 640, which that account is used for school safety magazines that we receive. It also covers another yearly book that we get, Keeping Your School Safe and Secure Yearly. This covers a lot of case law that's going on in schools. And also that account is used for the purchase of our crimes code and vehicle codes, which are used for the school police officers. And then we have an elementary account, which is 751. And that is also used for some uniforms, raincoats, and also batteries and radios for the elementary schools. And then I have an account number 810, which is used for dues to organizations that we belong to, such as McLaughlin, which is the Mid-Atlantic Great Lakes Organized Crime Law Enforcement Network, Now, they supply us with a lot of stuff when we needed floor plans for our area police departments. They did those for us at no charge. And I just wanted to mention that we have a total of approximately 25 full-time security officers, and they do a terrific job. And we also, including myself, have 6 police officers, school police officers. Counting myself, we have a retired chief of police. We have 2 Pennsylvania State Troopers retired. And we also have 2 other police officers who work as substitute police officers in local police departments.
Question.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I missed the one part. For the contracted services, what all does that include? What was that? Before?
That includes maintenance contracts on our CCTV cameras. And also, I use some of that for training for the police, annual mandatory training that we need, such as on handcuffing techniques, OC spray, and the use of our expandable batons. And this year I had used a company for training for the security department and the police department, which they have not been trained in a few years, so I felt it was best to get training so they can be trained how to handle students, different reactions, to help avoid lawsuits.
I see you have no court costs. We're not going to court for anything,
The officers go to court.
but that's not in the budget here when we're paying them.
That
that on a
is,
different
this
budget?
does not have salaries or benefits in their individual budgets.
So if they go to court, if that appear in the court, that's not in here.
That's correct.
Normally, if they go, it's during the school day.
during the school
If it's
day.
for a hearing and it's after school, they're salary.
Make sure that, it's explained that
Bless you.
it's already taken care of.
Yes.
Thank you. Anybody have questions for me? Nope. Thanks, Woody.
Thank you.
I just wanted to interrupt for a second. I received a message that was important that I get in touch with someone, and I just received an email about the $10,000 for the technology services. And this is from Dr. Charlene Brennan. She said the $10,000 for technology services has been eliminated by the IU, and she wants to make sure that we do clarify that, as that was discussed as an overall cost savings. In addition, the position that this person in the IU oversaw, this area was reduced. So I think it's really important that we are sensitive and responsive to this information as I was just informed of that. So I want to make sure that everyone realizes that that $10,000 is not. It is not in our budget. Dr. Brennan asked if I would get in touch with her, and she just sent me an email. They took it out of the budget. The person that was in the position, they cut that position, so it no longer is in any district's budget. Okay, so I just want to rectify that to make sure that we have set the record straight on that.
Just let me comment about that.
Okay.
We just had an IU meeting last month. Why would we've been told that? That's very strange to me, but I'm glad. You were right in assuming and suspecting something. Okay, thank you.
Jim Krzak, how would you like to come up here and?
I thought I was last.
You are.
What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have Donna go to the full packet, right?
Mara?
I actually have the budget up here. What?
That's what I said, I thought I was last. I don't want to butt in front of Mara.
Marie?
No, not in front of me necessarily, but I know Dr.
Dr.
Duffy
Duffy?
is special.
Dr. Duffy, would you like to do pupil services?
If you want me to.
Okay.
I was just checking.
Sit
if I
down,
could-
Jim, sit down, sit down.
I've been here since 5 o'clock.
That's all right.
Sorry about that.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
So you need to pull up.
I will, honey. That's okay, yours.
We're going back to 22.
22.
Oh, there it is.
By way of definition for pupil services, please remember that pupil services covers anything that deals with kids except academics. We are responsible for school psychologists, school nurses, home and school visitors, school counselors. Child accounting is under pupil services. Registration is under pupil services. So anything that deals with kids that does not include academic, oh, by the, yes, you did slip gifted in to get pupil services. So I guess I do have academics as well. I always forget about that because that's not normally under pupil services.
I'm looking for it, go ahead. You have it?
Pupil services is, as you're aware, under the guidelines and mandates of Pennsylvania Chapter 12. Chapter 12, we are responsible to meet the developmental needs of all students and to implement the district's comprehensive developmental guidance program. We're also responsible for providing services to those students who have been identified as being gifted, and they are covered under Chapter 16. We provide nursing and health services. Nursing and health services in the schools are actually covered by two separate entities within this Commonwealth. One is the Pennsylvania Department of Education, who provide us mandates that we are responsible to implement, but the other is also the Pennsylvania Department of Health. Sometimes those two organizations are in direct opposition to each other. Our pupil services department are gifted budget. We have the summer school for excellence, which we're budgeting roughly $6,000, but it's important to realize that that $6,000 is both an expenditure as well as an income. Those students who are participating in that summer school of excellence do pay for that program. So it is in essence a wash. Travel, we've budgeted very small amounts for that, $250 for elementary and secondary. That covers our gifted support teachers because each building does not have a gifted support teacher. So our elementary gifted support teachers are required to go from building to building. Our secondary gifted support teacher, her transportation costs, she is responsible to provide support to our students who attend some of the area colleges as well. So her transportation expenses are to the area colleges. Professional dues and fees are $900. By way of public service announcement too, our gifted staff have been invited to present at the state convention. They will be going next month. They will be presenting the gifted curriculum and program that you approved in August. It is a model for the state, so it is very, very good public relations for us. They also presented that at an IU in service. Under the Director of Pupil Services, postage is roughly $2,000. That primarily are mailings that are required for the nursing department. We are required to mail out the state mandated reports to parents that will be going out shortly. One of the areas that we've saved on postage, which I will be giving you a report on, is that in the past, the registration department, we have been mailing out all of our forms to prospective people who wish to enroll in the district. We are now going to be loading those on our website and directing the parents that they are to download those and fill those out before they come. If a parent does not have access to those forms, we are going to ask them to go to their nearest local school to pick those forms up. We're going to be saving ourselves about $800 in postage by doing that. With that in mind, also, I'm going to be asking for the board's approval. When we have two notaries, we have two wonderful women who work across the street for registration. They are both notaries. Currently, we do not charge for that service. If a parent comes, we provide notary services for free. If they go to a local notary, according to the state pricing, they are charged $15 per signature. What I'm going to ask for board approval is that we begin to charge a nominal fee of $5 per application. When I first looked into this, I thought we were only doing a very low number of notary work. And it turns out that we're doing a minimum of 600 notaries per year. Granted, it's not a lot of money, but given the budget the way it is, that's $3,000 that we can use to offset some of the postage that our department uses. Our printing costs, again, are roughly $400. That's primarily for the brochures that we use for the gifted program, as well as the paperwork that our nurses are required to fill out for the state reports. Our access printing is roughly $1,000. Our travel expenses are roughly $1,000, and that is used by various departments and pupil services as they go from building to building, primarily for our nurses. Further in our budget is SAP training for $500. IST supplies are roughly $300 per building. SAT testing supplies is roughly $8,300. And pupil personnel service supplies are roughly $4,500. That includes requests for the staff for books that they may wish to purchase that they use for reference. Our schools counseling services, we're looking at roughly $1,000 for travel. Material support, secondary buildings, we have budgeted $2,750 per building. Elementary, $250 per building. Our secondary career software runs us $3,200 per year. That software is utilized by our students as part of our career development program. It allows our school counselors, starting in 5th grade, to have our students get online, begin to investigate careers, begin to look at possible career avenues that they might wish to pursue. And then we, from that point, begin to develop with them graduation plans as they proceed up the spectrum. Attendance services, our material support's roughly $500, postage is $500, and travel is $1,000. One of the reasons for that is the money that is the travel that our home and school visitors do, doing home visits. I will be giving you a report next week in terms of, one gentleman earlier this evening talked about students who are not ours. We are addressing that with our home and school visitors, and I will be giving you a report, which I just received today, for next week in your packet, which will address that issue and will show you that we are becoming very, very active in doing investigations. I have requested and actually have received some of our elementary schools are going out into the parking lot with their digital cameras, taking photographs of license plates and sending them to me, and we are having our police department check out where those cars are registered. And when we're finding out that they may be registered in New Jersey, since it's a Jersey tag, and we know who it belongs to, we are doing home visits on this side of the river based upon the addresses that they are giving us. And as you'll see in the report that you'll be receiving next week, we have a substantial number for beginning of students who we have asked to, not asked, but we've actually withdrawn them from the district. We give them a notice, send them a letter that's been drawn up by one of our council, and informs them that they will be dropped from the rolls since they are no longer residents. But they are always given the opportunity to provide us with appropriate updated information. And if they do that, and that will be part of that report as well, you will see that they are not dropped from the rolls. We do a pretty thorough investigation to try and find those students who are not ours. Psychology services, this is one of our most expensive services because it is a mandated, it's one of those many, many unfunded mandates from the Commonwealth as well as the federal government. In essence, we are required to do a full psychoeducational evaluation for a student whenever a parent requests it. Not only are those the students that are in our schools, but that is also the students who may be in a non-public school, but their parents are residents of our district. We subcontract to the IU $200,000 for 2 additional psychologists who assist our own school psychologists. Other professional services, $5,000. This is used for a parent has a right to request an independent eval. That covers that. In addition, there are some times that we are required or requested or we need additional information from other medical professionals, such as a neuropsychologist, where we will have to pay for those services as well. ELL evaluations, ELL is English Language Learners, $5,000. Travel, elementary and secondary is roughly $1,000. Materials and supplies is $7,000. Now, as someone earlier alluded to, the Karnak of holding the envelope to your head to try and guess how much money, that's one of the things that I'm required to do because we're never sure when the testing companies are going to come out with a new version of the test. And I have to tell you that every time they do, it runs the district approximately $15,000 to $20,000, and we are required to utilize those tests because we cannot go into a court hearing and use an outdated test. We will lose immediately based upon the fact that we are not using the current versions of the test. So what I try and do is to get enough information in advance from the publishing companies when they're coming out with them. There are no tests coming out next year, so the $7,000 is just to buy what are called protocols, because the companies, not only do they get you when they sell you the brand new test, but then you have to go to them to buy what are called protocols that you have to use with their tests. So they get you coming and going with that. As I say, luckily this year coming up, we do not have any new tests coming out, so we're only expending roughly $7,000. Health services are contracted medical services. Yes.
Quick question on that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know approximately how much the costs are for the test, if we had to buy them?
If we have to buy new tests,
Yeah.
they range anywhere depending upon the test, and what's included in that, roughly $15,000 to $20,000.
Sorry, I missed that, that's what.
Yes,
Okay.
because when you're buying those, you're not only buying the testing materials, but they also require you to buy, as I say, the protocols. And what they do is they give you, you may spend $1,500 or $2,000 for one set of tests, and that included in there is only 25 protocols. Well, that's 25 kids. You know, we've got over 9,000 kids in our district, so
So based on your experience, how often do they do that?
depending upon the, roughly every 2 years.
Every 2 years?
Yeah, because you're dealing with so many different tests. This test, we're looking, you know, we've got WIATs, we've got WISCs, we've got BASCs. They all test something different. They all test different age groups. The other thing that we're getting clipped on a little more is when we have to buy Spanish language under the law, or some other language. Under the law, a child has to be tested in their native language. So right now, believe it or not, we're looking for Farsi. Okay, we need a translator for Farsi, so if anybody speaks it, please let me know, because we're looking for a translator. We have a need for it, because we have to provide that by law. Again, these are unfunded federal mandates, and they are unfunded state mandates. Okay, we are lucky. There are districts in this state that are running over 100 different languages. Contracted medical services, elementary, 12,000, secondary, 4,000. These are where we contract for mandated physicals, both dental as well as the physicals for our students, as well as elementary medical services. We do get a lot of medical services that are funded by outside sources. We have really investigated that, and I will tell you that we get that pretty much to the max. The vision van comes around to our schools. Our school nurses do a phenomenal job on finding out who needs vision, who needs glasses. We get those. These outside foundations are wonderful in providing us those services, and I think they need kudos for that. Other medical services, elementary and secondary, we're looking at roughly $15,000. That includes psychiatric evals. The fastest growing disability in this country right now is mental health, and we are required to do psychiatric evals for that. And I will be very honest with you, it's very difficult to find good adolescent and child psychiatrists to do those evaluations that are school appropriate. Right now, we're primarily using the IU. Okay. Travel for our nurses, roughly $1,000. One of the things that you graciously approved this past year were to the use of RNs. We hired 2 RNs, and I have those women on roller skates because they are going from building to building. The truth is that I could use more if we could get them, because right now we're having an issue, as I've spoken to Ms. Nathanson, if she's still here, about the field trips and use of nurses and trying to supply nurses for that. It is becoming an issue because I will not permit our school buildings to be uncovered so that we can supply a nurse for a field trip. That just doesn't make sense to me. We have medical needs in our buildings that are very severe in some instances. I am not going to put a child in jeopardy so that we can go to Wegmans. I just can't justify that. Any questions for me?
So, I just want to make sure I'm clear, so all of the 2100s are?
I actually have.
I don't, we don't have.
Yeah, I actually have 4 different accounts because I have pupil services. In pupil services are included school counselors, school psychologists. I also have child accounting, which is a separate account. There is also nursing, which is a separate account. And then there's 21. We also have non-public nursing and health services, which for us, we're very lucky, are very minimal up here. And then there's gifted. Let me not forget that. So that's my 4th account.
1243, yes. I'm sorry. No,
We
they do
don't.
not. I was not aware that they did not have that in their book, but they will have it. Yeah, they will have it. I will send it out tomorrow.
Dr. Duffy, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
We can all hear you.
I thought I was hearing something higher. Angel.
Yeah. One quick question.
Sure.
Under the health services for medical supplies,
Yes.
I believe, and I'm not 100% positive, but there are some programs that they can attend, the nurses can attend, and there's a possibility of getting reimbursements on the medical supplies on some levels. And I'm wondering if you've had the opportunity to look into that, or if you could.
We do get our medical reimbursements. We submit a report at the end of the school year, which gives us a substantial reimbursement from the Commonwealth. Maria, I want to say 190,000 or something in that neighborhood. We get reimbursed from the state for that. So we do that already, Ms. Ellison.
about 165,000.
165.
155 for the medical supplies,
That's for providing medical services.
medical services,
Yeah,
okay.
our medical supplies are really minimal.
Yeah, and I've noticed that, but I think that, well, I mean, maybe we can get into a conversation later about it, but I think there are some opportunities to get reimbursements that perhaps we don't get as of now.
Well, I know we just had an issue with the Commonwealth where they found fault with our reporting to the tune of about $2,200, and we had conversations with them, and it resulted from the fact that parents are choosing to see their own medical providers and not us, and we have no control over that. And that's what our conversation with the Commonwealth was, and they said, well, you didn't fall in the statistics, so we're taking, I don't know, $2,200 or $2,300 back. But
Yeah.
that was scoliosis, and there was some other minor report, and we can only send the letters home to the parents if they do not respond, and we contact them multiple times. If they do not send them back to us, there is not much we can do, and that's what happened in this situation. And as I say, it cost us roughly $2,200 of our $160,000.
Right, right. Well, yeah, I know there are some instances that perhaps there might be some opportunities, but that's fine. We can talk about it
I'll be
later.
happy to talk to you about that.
Okay, great.
I would also, since Mrs. Ellison, I'm just looking here, and again, we don't have this, but looking at what's up there and what's in the 90-page budget, again, it looks like some of the line items are different. So if we could just get some verification on that as we're moving forward, it would be helpful.
We can bring it up April 13th meeting to get clarification on it.
Well, I think it needs to be gone through before we get to that point, since the plan is,
Meeting with somebody.
well, I think it needs to be gotten together and
I
sent.
mean,
to-
yeah, the information definitely, but
Because if we're gonna vote on a proposed budget that evening,
You can send that ahead of time,
We can send
the
it.
packet, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think there's one other thing that's really important to note. When the governor gave his overview, one of the changes has to do with school nurses. The budget proposes to amend the public school code to permit school districts to hire nurses who complete a program of in-service training in school nursing approved by the Department of Education, similar to an RN position. Currently, a nurse must complete an additional certification course before being hired and employed as a public school nurse. Relief from this requirement will give school districts more flexibility in hiring personnel to ensure the health and safety of their students. The Pennsylvania Department of Ed estimates school districts could save approximately $50 million by utilizing other trained professionals and still cover the medical needs of students and schools.
There's also ways, as I've spoken to the board in the past, that we can do that from an economic standpoint. Because as I said at the very beginning, we're really covered by two agencies. We're covered by the Pennsylvania Department of Education, and our school nurses, Pennsylvania Department of Education, the school code mandates one nurse for 1,500 kids. So that locks us in there. But when you look at that, the mandated school health services are annual screenings and health records. That's it. So really, we need one nurse for 1,500 kids to do just that. That's not a year-long full-time job. But then we have the Pennsylvania Department of Health, who comes in and says, well, you have to provide health services and nursing services. They do not require CSNs to do that. And as I've said to the board, that's something you might want to consider at some point. That, you know, we have the RNs that we use, but we're using them to provide coverage. For example, we have, in the next month, we have all of our kindergarten registrations. So we've scheduled our RNs to go in and provide coverage for the building while the CSN is participating in the kindergarten registration to evaluate the paperwork that the parents are bringing to make sure the child has the appropriate immunizations and documentations to enroll as first time.
Thank you very
any other
much.
questions?
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Jimmy, your turn.
Are we sure? What else is gonna butt in front of me?
All right, you-
Okay, Donna, we're actually gonna run it through Donna's, right?
Okay, if you wanna do that, I
Yep.
have it up on the screen.
Can you tell everyone what tab?
Yeah, we're at 28.
Save the best for last, right? The last one?
Oh, now you're
Okay.
going over your actual line items, right? You're not doing a presentation for the 13th,
You can do
right?
whatever you wanna do.
I'll just hit on the highlights
You
of
can
the
do whatever you wanna do.
presentation. Okay, as soon as she gets that pulled up. Oh, there we go, okay. Department of Athletics, next page there is just a quick outline for you. Next page, page 3, philosophy. Just to hit on this, we talk constantly about trying to keep things as balanced as possible with their male and female athletes. Right now, we have 29 boys teams and 28 girls teams. So that's, I think, closer than any other school in our area, speaking to other athletic directors. And at the same time, we have 13 boys and 13 girls teams at the varsity level. So that one that is off or short on the girls' side is at a sub-varsity level. Next paragraph talks about the league and the PIAA that we compete in for our regular season games and championships. Very bottom paragraph there talks about the overall athletic budget, which is roughly around 1.2 million annually, which is the latest revision, 0.72% of the overall budget, I believe is what Marie had listed there. Okay, next page. Continue with the philosophy. We do everything for roughly 1,000 athletic events per season, or per year, I should say. Which again, the size of our teams in school, that's an enormous amount of details that I have to work for. The middle paragraph there will explain to you about the PIAA and the requirements that my office goes through for every athlete, making sure they're passing their grades in their classes. Also about the college recruiting aspect of it. Third paragraph there talks about approximately 1 out of every 3 students between grades 7 through 12 participate in at least one athletic program in our district. Next page, team history. Back in 97 to 2004, since I've been in the department since 1997, we had 43 total teams back then. In 2004, which is about a year after we joined Lehigh Valley Conference, used to be the East Penn, Miss Fisher, remember, we broke up for a short time and now the league all got back together with the Route 22 schools, if you want to call it that, with the addition of Nazareth. We added those programs, which are all middle school programs, due to the community leagues not covering them anymore, and to make it a balance that all schools in the league would be equal in what they cover and offer within reason and within their budget constraints. 2007, we added the middle school boys and girls as an extra team and another junior high wrestling team because of the number of students at the middle school level, and I believe there was an attendance issue that we felt if we added those middle school teams, I believe Mrs. Mitchell was the principal then, it would get our attendance up to where the state was requiring us to be. And believe it or not, I'd like to see what those attendance figures are now that we've had those programs at the middle school level to make those kids need to come to school and be actively involved. In 2009, last year, 2 years ago, we eliminated a boys and girls middle school basketball and a junior high wrestling team. And then in 2010, last year, under your request, we did add varsity and junior varsity girls lacrosse, which takes me up to 57 total teams. At the very bottom there, as you see, my budget has not increased
Question.
except for personnel.
Are we back at the level that we were with the wrestling team for the junior high school program? Didn't they sponsor
That-
themselves?
That's correct. That was paid for by them, but I did the physicals, I did the accounting of their grades, their attendance, I did all that. However, they sent me a check for $6,000 from the Booster Club. I sent it to Marie's office to be deposited into my account. That's what the agreement and promise was by them.
All right.
Okay? So when you look at the figures that I have control over, they have never increased, but the contracted costs have, such as coaches' salaries, our bus drivers and transportation, officials' fees, secretarial salaries, administrative, accounting, training salaries, etc. Okay, next page. I'm not going to go over that. That's what we offer at the high school and what we currently offer at the middle school in the fall. Next page is the winter, same thing. The strike-throughs are the teams that we just eliminated last year. And then the spring season, if you take a look in the middle, varsity and junior varsity girls lacrosse were newly added in 2010 and now are in my budget this year and next year, okay, from this point forward.
Right, Mr. Chris?
Well, the only increase we have in that is that roughly $25,000, which I'll get to when we get to the line items. Staffing history prior to '97, you can see the staff that was in the office. Director of Athletics, 2 full-time secretaries, and that has been there for many, many years. I'm going to rely on Ann for that, correct? And your dad was the athletic director? So I haven't added staff either. In 1997, when all those teams were added, we did add myself at that time in '97 as the assistant director of athletics for $10,000 stipend. I taught 1 through 4 at the middle school, gave up my prep and lunch, and worked till about 9 or 9:30 at night till the end of the day when all events were over for that $10,000 stipend. 03 to 06, that staff was reduced. That assistant position was cut out of there, and I was again back operating with an extra 15 teams, I believe it was, compared to the '97 levels. In 2006, I asked the board to reinstate the assistant director of athletics, and instead of paying one person, I had 2 people that were quality people that both offer something different in a unique way for almost the same amount of money, and those salaries have not gone up either, and explains a little bit of their details on what their job description is. So I'm back to almost full staffing. Okay, then the loss of my Easton High School workday or Easton School District workday in office hours, I've actually gained a little bit of out of, because the 2 athletic directors that are assistants of mine do very little during the day unless I'm out of the office. When I am out of the office, they do help cover the office and make decisions in my absence, whether I'm sick, vacation, or oftentimes at board meetings. When I'm here, there's usually events going on at the high school or middle school, and they're helping to cover those events, again, in my absence. I'm usually not at home sitting on the couch. I'm usually at an administrative meeting, and then they're covering those roles. So they're important to have for me if we want to have those covered. Okay, the bottom athletic training staff, again, that shows the history of where they came about, how that happened, because the addition of all the teams that we've had, mostly since 1997. Okay, next page. My department is all inclusive. I handle all event ticket details, which I went over in my athletic committee meeting, and that figure I'm actually at roughly $218,000, which I'll get to at the end in athletic revenue. I handle all financial details, mostly separate from Marie's office, from purchase orders to officials payment to my payroll for everyone in my department. I'm also an HR department. I handle all evaluations of my staff, personnel matters to give to Mr. Castrovinci's department to have board approval. The filing of all PIAA officials. Last year, they instituted that any official had to have all 3 clearances on file before they could officiate in the Easton School District. So imagine that task. I have 7 games going on at one time, and I have to get to every field and look at their card and check their clearances. If they're an official since 2007, I physically had to see the original and get a copy. So currently I have every official that has officiated in Easton since last year, all 3 clearances in a file categorized alphabetically, because we need to do that because they're working in our district. Remember Castrovinci, Mr. Castrovinci, we went over that. It's a monumental task, and Mrs. Arndt, my assistant, is the one who checks that, and every day when we go to an event, if there's a new official, before he can start and I give him his check, I need to check all 3 of his clearances before he can begin. And again, that's ongoing per PDE that has to be done. I handle all transportation arrangements for all of our home, away events and our shuttles. I assist Mr. Case and the head custodians with making sure the buildings are open for all home events. and I have to work closely with the secretarial staff for all outside groups. I work daily, almost daily, with Mrs. Ferretti in Mr. Kish's office, Mrs. Bartholomew, Mrs. Hahn, and Mrs. Falcone, who handle who's using the middle school and high school facilities to make sure we don't have conflicts in gym use or field use. Next page, athletic budget history. Got these figures as accurately as possible on down. The 2010 budget obviously has some question marks because all the accounting, I believe, is not completely officially done for that yet, because we're still working on that budget. But as I said, we'll get to the revenue part of it, which will bring that amount down drastically. And then the 11-12 estimated budget, I believe that figure is different because this was created back in December, and there have been some modifications to that anticipated budget. Okay, the next page, we'll quickly go to the Excel, and I can just take you quickly line by line and show you the basic categories that I have. First group, up at the top, the physical exams. We have roughly over 2,000 athletes that come out for athletics. Everyone must have a physical exam on file after June 1st of that school year before they can even step foot on our field or court to practice. If you estimate that out, that means for my staff, the trainers, the school doctor, and to pay for the physicals about $8 each. I don't know if we'll find another doctor in our area that will take over after Dr. Schaffner is done. Also talking with Dr. Duffy, many of those physicals also cover the physical that our 8th and 11th graders must have on file, however that is. And we update every office nurse with those tetanus shots and school records. So it's not just an athletic physical, but it's actually important to keep our student records up to date. Probability liability insurance, can't control that. Postage, $300. Advertising and printing and binding right there. Mr. Myers, that is what I'm looking at again, the estimate and the university ticket proposal I have to come to the board for March would wipe some of that out because of, we won't be using those costs anymore. The general supplies for all teams. Last year was $28,400 because every team had an amount broken down for their general supplies. What I do in the beginning of the year is I take that $76,500, all equipment goes out to bid, then I look at what is necessary for the kids to compete safely, then that $76,000 is split up between all of our teams. And that is how I make it work for roughly 2,000 athletes. Weight room certification and repairs, $5,000 for the weight room. Field lining, that pays for most of the field white and some minor repairs that I help Mr. Case with when things, goalposts break, soccer goals and so on, and we need to repair or fix those. Ms. Kidra, I'm not sure what the 751 is, the non-capital equipment.
It's any type of equipment that you buy that's more than $500.
I don't have a notation next to that. I don't remember what came off of that line or why that figure is there. That's one I wasn't sure of. Dues and fees, we owe a league dues for being part of that, and also to the PIAA. They've stayed pretty level, so I can cut some money out of there. And also the miscellaneous expenditures for awards, I'm coming in roughly around $1,000 the last couple years, so I cut some money out of there. The next one down are uncontrolled costs. They're contracts that are calculated through Marie Guidry's office. And there's a little description there of what they all add up to.
Your miscellaneous expense of awards, is that to put names on long-standing awards?
Things like that.
And the whole,
when I buy the letter E, to give to the varsity E to buy the plaque, we buy the chenille letters. Our Wall of Fame, when athletes make our Wall of Fame. So any type of awards like that that have been ongoing, and the history of Easton, we only spend about $1,000 on that. Down below, lease technology, telephone, and so on. Again, our estimated cost that are broken out for my department. Okay, general supplies, $9,000, that buys all the athletic training equipment, the braces that we use, pairs of crutches at times, things like that. Laundry, that's what the equipment manager uses, $3,000 to buy the soap, the laundry material, the blood killer that we have to buy. Some of our equipment, when it comes in with blood stains on it now, we have to make sure it's treated properly to kill those infections and so on. So there's some specific washing agents that we do need to use for certain equipment. Okay, office equipment, $4,000, and again, that goes for everything that my department must use to operate. All the next categories are almost all exactly the same. You'll have the staffing, which is regular, professional, other. You'll have your Social Security, retirement, and so on, which again are uncontrolled on my end. You'll have an officials line. That's how much we pay for officials for that sport. Uncontrolled, based on the negotiated rate throughout the state. Repair and maintain equipment. Sometimes we cannot repair it ourselves, and I must send it out to, for example, shut reconditioning, helmets, things like that. Transportation is another common line. It's to get our athletes for all levels, for example, of baseball, not just varsity, that will cover all teams. The general supply, you'll notice again, is zero for this year because nothing has been broken out yet. I will not buy baseball equipment until I see what they need, how much, sizing, and all the bids go out. Then I will allocate that amount to that team to reduce the waste. The tournaments, that is there in case they make a good run deep into the playoffs. If they go deep into the playoffs and I need to order an extra bus because they need to go to Hershey or somewhere far away for an event, that $300 would help to offset our transportation cost. And usually that's a good thing for us. And again, you can go through boys basketball. They have some game workers there, which again are ticket sellers, takers. Security is there, which is a little bit different. Girls basketball matches boys basketball. Cheerleading, again, self-explanatory there. Cross country, same thing. They get a little bit less because they don't have officials at their meets. Field hockey, self-explanatory. Football's a little bit bigger because of the enormous undertaking it is to have a successful football team like we do. I'm still negotiating with the squad, the Easton Emergency Squad, and it was Forks Township, but now it is out of Palmer, suburban, to cover our middle school campus when we have football games, and that is necessary to have that. And we also pay a doctor from Easton Orthopedic Group to be at our varsity football game to cover that event. And you have officials, game workers, again, self-explanatory. Scouting, the videographer, if you want to call it that. That is mandatory through our league. The league bylaw states that we must exchange the last 3 games with our next team Saturday morning of the next day if we play on a Friday night. That is generally about $1,600. However, I've asked the Booster Club to pick up any remaining amount over $900 to the company that does that. And then security, repair and maintain equipment, transportation again. If you look down a little further, miscellaneous expenditures on football, if we can go back just quickly. That is a City of Easton tax where they tax me on every ticket I sell for Cottingham's game and the Thanksgiving Day game. And I'm running close to just writing a check. It started out around 7,000 or 8,000, and we have 11,600 estimated that just goes to the City of Easton for their amusement tax to be able to hold the game there. Okay? Golf, self-explanatory. Boys lacrosse, same as the others. Boys soccer, girls soccer, softball, swimming, boys tennis. All the others are very self-explanatory in the line items, again, in their description of what is there. Obviously, the green, for me, is a savings where I can cut a few dollars off of them. Most of the reds are in red because they're increasing salary, Social Security, retirement, and so on. At the bottom, just a brief description, Girls Across was added, roughly 25.5 will be in the next budget. Right now, we have 60 7th through 9th grade wrestlers. We had one team, which can house 17 wrestlers at a time. The Booster Club paid $6,000 to reinstate that junior high white wrestling team at $6,000 for another 17 to 20 boys. And we still had enough kids, another 20, that had nowhere to go, and they never competed on our teams because they couldn't beat the kid ahead of them. So the only thing I would ask in my next year's budget is to reinstate that $6,000 due to that, again, an enormous amount of kids from 7 through 9 in our wrestling program. The bottom, we increased revenue, which I'll get to that in a minute, and I had some strike-throughs there since this was made originally. I am up to $218,000 in athletic revenue, $46,000 over what we projected based on where we've been over the last 8 to 10 years. Okay, so if we can go to that attachment, and then I am done, and I'll answer any questions that you may have. My copy and your copy is a little outdated. This is the actual up-to-date based on my February printout. You can just, yeah, there you go. If you can go back to the beginning and you look at 2003 in boys basketball, you can see how much money we made in boys basketball and what the rough average is at the bottom on line 18 there. Okay? We had a blip in the screen in 2007. Some reason it went up to $10,000 in athletic revenue for boys basketball, and that may be the year we were undefeated and went far into the playoffs. I'd have to look back at the records. Girls basketball, you can see we're averaging about $4,500 a year in athletic revenue. Football, if you look through there, you can see how much. And again, you go back a few years and you look at $152,000 the one year. That may have been the 100th Easton Peaburg game. But this year, we didn't have the 100th Easton Peaburg game. But again, a long run into the playoffs, $160,000 this year in athletic revenue for football alone. Wrestling, that averages, I usually estimate about 19 or 20,000. This year I'd estimated 25 and came up a little short because we ended up with roughly 21 in athletic revenue. Special events are special events in that it's not guaranteed money. That money comes from extra playoff money we earn. It also comes from us hosting tournaments at times. So special events I estimate around $3,000 a year. Anytime we have those, again, special or extra events, that is extra money coming into the Easton School District that was not anticipated. If we had teams that, I'll put it blunt, stink, that'd be zero. If our teams finished after the regular season, you would never make any money. And there are some schools in our area that are astounded at what we bring in. When they hear $218,000 athletic revenue, the next highest that responded to me was a little bit further west of here up Route 22 in our league. $60,000 was the most. Most of them average between 25 and 30, some around 40. The next one was 60, and we're at 218,000. So each year I will estimate, again, about 175 to 180,000 in anticipated revenue from our athletic events. Okay?
Okay, Jim, can I ask you a question now?
Sure.
What are considered the general supplies?
What's that?
What is considered general?
Which group are we looking at, Ms.
We
Fisher?
go overall. General
That's
supplies.
the supply that goes for that sport. So baseball general supplies would be when they order their baseballs, set of catcher's equipment. That's what is their general supply in their line.
But you don't have anything down for any,
Correct.
$75,000.
I get $76,000, I believe, is after a 5 or 10% cut the last couple of years. So that $76,000 is what buys me all of our necessary protective equipment. Let's say this year, I think right now I have about $24,000 left on that line. Now my coaches don't want to hear it, but the budget is frozen. That means $24,000 we're going to sit aside in case something breaks or I need something safety-wise to compete.
I understand that. Can I ask you a question? And I'll go back to last year. How do you come up with $6,200 for boys basketball and only $1,800 for girls?
Because the girls got new uniforms, I believe, the year before, and the boys needed them this year. So
Is that, so general supplies does include the uniforms?
yeah, oh yeah. So that's what I'm saying, so if I gave every team a set amount, there's no way I can divide it up, because if the girls would need uniforms this year, you just can't divide it. And as much as you say for like Title IX, you have to give them the same amount, if I gave them all the same amount and split up $76,000, you'd never be able to buy a team uniforms, especially a football team.
So they're getting, is the football getting different uniforms every year?
Football team hasn't had uniforms about 5 years. The last set they ran them out, I think they were from 2002. This is, I think, their third year on this set of uniforms.
So,
We have uniforms in use by some of our teams that still say 99 on them, because we label them by number in the equipment room.
so there
and
are,
year.
there are parts of the uniforms or the team practices that have to be added new year. They get new ones every year. They
No,
have,
no one does. No one.
they don't get new,
New.
T-shirts that they wear? No?
Occasionally, we will buy some of those. For wrestling, I have a set where they each get a top and a bottom to be on the podium when they accept their awards. They're supposed to be in team apparel. And for also the kids that don't come with a clean T-shirt in wrestling, I don't want them practicing and using something hanging in the locker room because of germs and infections that could get passed. So we launder them, but wrestling is the only sport that I buy a pair of shorts for practice and a shirt that I have on hold in the equipment room to give to an athlete if they don't have something clean to wear.
Why is it just the one sport then? That's what I'm asking you. What about, basketball? They don't
Basketball
have the
has a
shorts-
reversible penny that they use and a pair of reversible or red shorts that they wear. If we lose number one, then I just buy a new penny that says number one on it, or just one to match, to replace the one that was lost. We don't buy new sets. Girls basketball bought their own this year
That's what I
because
was.
they wanted something bigger and better than what I could afford. The boys and girls soccer teams bought new warm-ups. There was something bigger and better than what we could afford, so their booster club bought their own. So that's what our teams have been doing.
Did the girls' booster club do it, or the girls themselves?
Well, the girls helped their booster club raise money that they wanted fancy top and bottom, 2 different color practice pennies, and so they bought them themselves. So did the soccer team. Our baseball team and softball team, I have not bought uniforms for them since my tenure in 8 years, because the baseball team buys their own uniforms, top and bottom from Majestic. Mr. McIntyre, the head softball coach, he goes and he gets deals when he goes to clinics on his own. He buys all his own uniforms. So if I had to take them out of the 76,000, I'd really be pinching pennies.
But since they do that, for some sports that do that are not getting a fair price on that 76,000.
Well, they may want something else in return for that. It's,
So you're not giving them anything as far as general supplies.
if they came, yeah, if they, like volleyballs, you still have to buy
No,
volleyballs.
no, I'm talking about volleyball. You just said that the teams that buy their own.
Well, softball will still need catcher's gear. They may need other things that go along. An L screen to protect the pitchers when they're practicing. So they still need a lot of that stuff. And I bargained with the coaches that, I can get you this amount of money, but if you want new uniforms, you may have to buy them yourself from your booster club.
Somehow down the line, someone's going to get short-handed.
No,
That's-
no one has gotten short-handed in the 8 years yet, Ms. Fisher.
All right,
And I won't let
Tim.
it
So when
happen.
I ask people tell me this, I'm just going to say you go see Mr. Krisak.
That is
Okay.
correct.
All right, will do.
Yep. If it's necessary equipment for safety or for uniform, and if I had to buy it, then we would buy it.
I
If they
understand.
want something they want the Cadillac instead of the Chevy, they're gonna have to maybe help or go buy it themselves. Or the kids want to sometimes keep their own uniform. So a lot of times, like
Is there any
volleyball, will
team-
buy their own,
Okay.
then the kids keep it at the end of the season, and then they buy a new one next year.
Is there any team that doesn't buy their own? And
I
you've got to
would-
give
you
them.
caught me off guard, I'd have to look at every single
And
team.
then you have
go
to
through
give them money each year, correct?
Well, if they need
It's
things,
put in their
sure.
budget.
I've never had a coach yet that we haven't worked out what they needed, safety, equipment, supplies, that we haven't purchased yet.
Okay.
Mr. Pakusak, I have one question.
Okay?
You don't have anything for a category for 2009-10 expenditures, which would be accurate at this point because you would have completed all of your calculations and everything, right? Is there any way you could add that column in there so that we could see a comparative?
It is at the end, Mrs. Ellison, at the very end there.
No, I think she means Carrie, do you mean on the spreadsheet that has each individual account?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do that.
It would be helpful as we move forward here to see where we've gone and what we're doing. You know, I think that it would lend itself some informative type details.
I'm a little lost on that request.
Here, where it
Actuals.
says 10, 11,
Okay?
and 11, 12, she'd like to have the 09, 10 column dropped in there with the information.
Which I believe was done prior to Penimation, right? I think last year, or this year.
No, that was the first year of animation.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
And you would have that somewhere to drop that in
Yeah.
on
we'll do
computer?
that. Yeah.
Okay, we'll work on that. So I'll look for 0910.
I'm just looking, I'm just curious, the medical services, the physical exams that you have listed here on the very beginning of the spreadsheet.
Mhm.
Again, I don't see them listed in the 90 pages here in the athletic department. I don't know, do those go into a different section of
They went
the?
into just the 300 account. I compiled everything by 100, 200, 300s, and
So
dropped that in. Yes, it
so
is there.
But not in the 3,000 section then, you're saying? And
Yes, it
it's-
is. Yes, I'll take a look at that too.
Okay, I'm
I'll
just
verify
looking here,
that.
I don't see it here, I am looking. And then your bottom line phone number, Jim, you got your phone number? You have an increase of about $31,000 on the total, so is that, from what I can tell, mostly just increases in,
All
in
salary.
salaries, yep.
Salaries and benefits,
So I'm
yes.
curious, you have the footnote here that says, and this is why I'm just a little confused, it says girls lacrosse was added and anticipate 25,500 in next year's budget, plus requesting the wrestling team placed back in.
Well, I think the only new cost, it would be the $6,000. That would be above and beyond the contracted increases that we would have. The
Okay.
I was just making a note that, again, my budget had to go up last year and this year due to girls lacrosse being added. See what I mean? That's just a footnote to remind you, right?
Okay, because I just want to look here, I was just confused because you have the $6,000 equals this plus 31.
That plus
1,000.
31.5 should actually be deleted because I'm not asking for girls lacrosse because that's now into the budget.
Okay, so it's not in it, so
Correct.
the number that you have here, this 1,436,835, that's everything, or?
That does not include the 6,000 if we add the extra wrestling team.
Okay, so these, okay. I wanted to.
And then we offset that cost by the roughly 180 to 218,000 athletic revenue. So that's why when it comes out, it's more like 1.2 million for the athletic budget because the revenue then offsets that.
I do, and I appreciate the information that you gave us. I'm just very concerned because, you know, what we're looking at and how many things we cut last year and asking, I'm afraid it gives false sense of what we're able to do by requesting things get added back in, since we've listened to all of the other departments as well, and we have, I'm sure people would love to be asking to have other things added that were cut as
Absolutely.
well.
You asked about the $16,000. It is included in the 3,200s.
Okay.
Within the 333 and that $108,650. I compiled all of the 300s for
Gotcha.
that $108,650.
Okay, so those officials also includes the medical exams.
Just
Correct.
so I'm
Yes,
clear,
it does.
You have a profit of how much?
$218,000 plus to date. We'll get a little bit of reimbursement yet from the wrestling team going to states and the playoffs, but
You're the only department making a profit, and you're asking to take out of your profit $6,000.
well, if you call it a profit, I mean, obviously, the board gives me
Revenue.
1.4 million.
Right.
And then we offset it with roughly 200,000 using rough figures. I'm just asking because there were 60 junior high wrestlers out. They have nowhere else to go. And we've been through this with the people that came to the podium all last year during budget cuts. You know, we cut basketball and some of the others because they can go back to the community and still participate. The community wrestling programs do not go beyond 6th grade. They stop at 6th. Therefore, those 7th through 9th graders have nowhere else to go. That's,
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Kukuczak?
Tonight.
I understand we're past the time we wanted to go, so, before we, move on, there's one thing, I'd like to take a moment and allow our substitute solicitor to read a statement for us before we move on. David Jordan will read this statement.
Thank you. Pertains to Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan's personnel file has been turned over to the Colonial Regional Police under court order as part of their investigation. The district's Human Resources Director, John Castrovinci, has examined Mr. Sullivan's personnel file. It is reported that it does not contain any charges or allegations or discipline matters related in any way to the type of sexual misconduct charges Mr. Sullivan faces as a result of the criminal charges filed against him by the police. Under section 67.708B7 of the Open Records Act, most of the material contained in the personnel file, including performance ratings, reviews, written criticisms of an employee, grievance material, and information regarding discipline and demotion, are exempt from disclosure. If the board is not satisfied with Mr. Castrovinci's representation that no material contained in the file is related in any way to the pending charges, the board has the right to vote as a whole to examine Mr. Sullivan's file. However, we would not recommend that the board open the file to the public, as such action could expose the district to liabilities. And this is so because of the pending criminal investigation, the Open Records Act, and the Personnel Files Act, which restrict public access to personnel files information, recognizing that certain employee privacy rights are involved.
Thank you. One other thing before we move on to our next part of the meeting. I would like to make sure I thank our central administration and anyone who is under contract who decided today to take the advice of the governor and take a freeze. I want to thank everybody who did for the board for stepping up to the plate and hitting the ball. So I want to thank all of you who did, and I appreciate it, and I'm sure the rest of the board does, and we'll see where it goes from there. With that said, we're going to go move on to the next meeting is scheduled for April 13th at 9 a.m. to 3 a.m. here.
3 a.m.
What did I say?
3 p.m.
Hell, I'm getting punch drunk. 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. You know, if we're going to do 9 to 3, I just pull up my sleeping bag. All right. With that, we're going to go to public comment on non-agenda items. And here's your time to speak, and I hope we keep it to minimal so we can get out of here at a decent time. Anybody got anything to say? Please step up now. If not, fellow board members can I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
I will see
Let me
everybody
show you what I did with
at veterans meeting. Thank you, sir,
This is his
for arriving.
list. I created a spreadsheet.